and practice. So therefore, what I will share with you today is literally based on, findings from my studies is what the focus will be. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And at some point I might stop, here and there for some interactions. Feel free to, chime in or use the chat, when we start, okay? All right. So the title of the presentation today, as you are aware, is, my racial trauma and pain, your discomfort, silence, or courage. And I purposely chose this title because it's a sort of encouragement for nurses to speak up, for students to speak up for one another, to also for individuals who are in the racial ethnic minority to have the courage to also speak up for themselves, and to encourage all of you, when you see something, do something about it. To be a, not to be a bystander, but to stand up, okay? So this evening I'm coming to you from the unceded land of Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe here in Central Michigan University area. And my positionality, for this particular presentation, I'd like to tell you that I speak from my experience and my position, as a Black woman. I am the mother of 3 Black children, a nurse educator and a mentor. I am a Nigerian immigrant to the United States. I do have experience and continue to experience racism, both in my personal and professional life. I have experienced accent bias and still do experience accent bias from time to time. I also notice that people might find it easy sometimes to dismiss me because of the color of my skin or my accent sometimes. And again, like I mentioned, the focus of my work is on anti-Black racism. My studies are focused on those. But that does not mean that I do not care or that I do not advocate and speak up against other kinds of biases, prejudices, or other types of isms. But my most knowledge is on anti-Black racism. So I wanted to make that clear. So what are the objectives today? I'm just hoping that you get what you can out of this, that you get what you want out of this presentation, really. Even though I have these objectives here, my goal is to provide information. I do not believe that there is a magic bullet to addressing biases or prejudices. I believe that people need to work on that. I do not have all the solutions to eliminating racism. My hope is that you listen, that you learn, and then that you take action, that you become a better ally and a co-conspirator in the work against racism in nursing. So, we know that major nursing organizations in the past year or two have released very strong statements about, racism in nursing and how to address it. So the American Nurses Association has released other statements. Today, I'm just gonna try to speak on one of the ones that I find most compelling besides the work on the Commission to Address Racism in Nursing. That collectively we must emerge from silence and speak with one strong voice as leaders and role models of compassion and empathy for our patients, families, community, and most importantly, towards one another. Our voice is our commitment to making a difference in all that we do for those we serve. We must work in partnership with nurses everywhere to educate, advocate, and collaborate to end systemic racism, particularly within nursing. As champions of the Nursing Code of Ethics, we must recognize human dignity, regardless of the race, culture, creed, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, age, experience, or any other aspect of their identity. So we must do our part to address this ongoing issue of disparity in our profession and within healthcare. So you can see from my slide here that I have switched the places of diversity and inclusion. And why did I do that? Because I really do believe strongly that what we need most importantly is inclusion. We need diversity, but the most important aspect of it all is inclusion. Inclusion is the core element for successfully achieving diversity. We can have diverse individuals, but if they don't all feel included within our environment, then we really haven't achieved the purpose of diversity. So inclusion is achieved by nurturing the climate and culture of the institution through professional development, education, policy, and practice. The objective of inclusion is to create a climate that fosters belonging, respect, and value for every individual within the organization and institution, to encourage engagement and connection throughout the institution and within the community. So equity is the principle of providing everyone with the opportunity to attain their full educational and professional potential, while nobody feels disadvantaged from achieving those potentials. Diversity really is, all the aspects that makes us different, right? All the ways in which we differ. The most important part of that diversity really is to feel included and to feel that we all have opportunities to achieve to our fullest potential. So then, what is racism and what is anti-racism, right? So before I even get into that, I want to say, rather than saying I am not a racist, it is actually better to say I am anti-racist, right? Because we all have our biases. The important thing is understanding them and doing whatever you can to ensure that it doesn't affect your interactions with people you meet in your everyday life, including at work and at school, right? So racism is an organized system in which the dominant racial group, based on an ideology of inferiority, categorizes and ranks people into social groups called races and uses its power to devalue, disempower, and differentially allocate valued societal resources and opportunities to the groups defined as inferior. So anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, structures, policies, and practices and attitude. So the power is redistributed and shared equitably. So the point of being an anti-racist is you recognize, you identify, and you do something about it. That's the point of it. And again, like I was saying to Liz earlier, it takes time. It is not going to happen overnight. The system that we live in has been in existence for 200 plus years. So we don't want it to take another 200 years to change. However, we must begin to act in order to begin to make some changes. So I have a few questions for you. You could type it in the chat box if you want, or you could chime in. You can unmute yourself and chime in. So how many of you are comfortable discussing cultural competence in nursing or in healthcare?
Can you define cultural competence?
So cultural competence is understanding cultures and being able to, well, if I define it for you, then it kind of, I will stop now. It will defeat the purpose of my question, actually. So I'm not going to say that. But think about it, because there are other questions that comes with it, right? So because in nursing, we talk about cultural competence all the time. We're working towards cultural competency, awareness, skills and all of those things. So, and the question here is, are you comfortable discussing it? Not doing it, discussing that, right? And I can't see the chat because of my presentation thing. So I don't know if people are putting anything in the chat or not. So think about that. And you don't have to respond, by the way, but so think about it. We can talk about it at the end. So, and how many of you are comfortable discussing racism? You know, how comfortable are you? Are you very comfortable, just comfortable, uncomfortable, or very uncomfortable having those discussions?
I'll share what's in the chat. Melody says, I feel comfortable discussing it.
Okay.
Gabby states, comfortable feeling uncomfortable.
Okay.
And Liz agrees. Sarah, Gabby, I like that wording. I feel similar. And Melody states, comfortable discussing racism, not very comfortable.
Okay, very good. So, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. And that's what towards the end of this presentation, we'll have some tools that perhaps can help you have those conversations, right? So like I said, it's baby steps. So long as you're taking those steps, it's okay. What we don't want is inaction. We want people to act, right? Okay, so what makes it difficult to discuss race and racism for you? What is it about it that either makes you uncomfortable or makes it difficult to even broach those subjects?
Personally, it becomes uncomfortable for me when there's conflicting conversation. So if there's, somebody on the other end of the spectrum that I'm having to convince or dispute against, I guess.
Okay, so that's not unusual, right? When there's a disagreement, and one of the reasons in 1993, Dr. Barbie wrote an article about silence on racism in nursing, and one of it is that nurses do not like conflict, right? That's one of the major reasons. She had 5 reasons, and one of them is that we do not like conflict, right? And that we like to say, because we are such a caring profession, how can we even begin to imagine that something like racism exists in our profession is another one of them. Okay, so we'll get to that in a minute. So then, this next question is not my original question. I'm borrowing it, right? I'm borrowing it from Jen Elliott. If you are a white person, in this presentation today, and you would like to be treated the way Black people are treated in our society, in nursing education and practice, I want you to type yes in the chat box. If you are comfortable, if you're a white person in our midst today during this conversation, and you would like to be treated the way Black people are treated in our society in the United States or in nursing education and practice, please type yes in the chat box. Like I said, this question is not original to me, so I'm borrowing it, okay? But it is important to our conversation. Okay, is there anything in the chat?
There's one no.
Okay.
And
that's one no.
Yeah, 2 no's so far.
Okay.
Margaret mentioned earlier when we were on the last slide that they struggle with speaking up about racism or cultural competence because they don't want to take space for those who have experienced more issues with the subjects. And Melody states that she's afraid of making someone uncomfortable, and Liz experiencing gaslighting when asking about it in a professional setting. And we have more no's. We have 4 no's total.
Awesome, thank you. Let's get back to that question towards the end of questions and answers so we can have more robust conversation, okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to play this video. So there's a little bit of a technical thing that I have to do, so bear with me. Let me know if you can hear it, thumbs up if when it starts playing, if you can hear it. Hope it plays. What's happening here? All right, so 40 seconds. It played well when we tried it earlier, but let's see.
You could try to refresh the internet page and it might like reload the video starting.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off, Melody.
No, I was just gonna say, maybe we have to all turn our cameras off, even though not many of us have our camera on. Sometimes
Oh,
it takes bandwidth or something.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand. You didn't understand the directions. If you white folks want to be treated the way blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
Okay, so you can still hear me, correct? All right, so I had to play that. Like I said, it wasn't my original thought, but that is over 20 years that this video came out. The point and the title of this presentation today is questioning the discomfort and silence when other people are experiencing racism or biases, despite what their background might be, is that we must speak up about it. Now, how does nursing define racism? So the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing defines racism as assault on the human spirit in the form of actions, biases, prejudices, and an ideology of superiority based on race that persistently cause moral suffering and physical harm of individuals and perpetuate systems of injustices and inequities. So that is the newest definition from the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing. So do we even have racism in nursing? We keep saying that. I think we already know the answer to that. So the latest survey of 5,600 nurses did show that we have racism in nursing, and I'll leave this for you to read later on. Let's not, dwell on it. I'm sure you've already had access. But how does racism show up in nursing? How do people even experience biases in our profession, no matter what their background is? But especially, how do nurses, students of color, describe their experiences with racism or biases or discrimination? So they come from exclusion, not including them in discussions or even in group work, incivilities, some acts of incivility, showing disrespect for the individual, inappropriate jokes. In the workplaces, like inequitable work assignments, invalidation of individual experiences. And I know somebody in the chat said they didn't want to take spaces. So it's okay to be in the space. The most important aspect is not to invalidate somebody's experience because they are not the same as your experience. So racial biases and assumptions about an individual or a group or a person because of their cultural affiliations. And also the denial of professional opportunities are some of the ways that racism shows up in our profession. So why do nurses not talk about racism? We mentioned that a little earlier. But in the next few slides, I'm actually going to share with you some of the ways experiences of racism from my studies have shown up, how it affects individuals and how they explain or describe their experiences with racism within our profession. So in the first statement, this person, one of these participants said, they did not even give me a chance. They judged my competency and knowledge based on my accent and skin color. Then they dismissed me. And the other nurse said, the nurses I worked with there were horrible. They were insensitive. They acted like they did not want me there. They ganged up on me and they were always reporting me to the manager for no apparent reason. Overall, it was a hostile environment. And the third one says, because of how they treated me, I was afraid to ask questions. I was kind of scared. I didn't know the right thing to do or who to turn to for help because they all just watched it happen and said nothing. I felt that they were all against me. I was just dying inside and getting frustrated, going home crying. I went through a lot emotionally. The other people were not supportive. They just made it worse. Not only that, because I was new to the country, I was very scared. Emotionally, the stress was too much. I was just dying in silence. These are not my words. I wanted to share this with you. So the next one says, the experiences I had when I worked at that job was bad. I was very scared of going to work there. So while I was there, I was always looking for another job, a better place. I never felt secure. So I always had a second job. I started looking for a better future for myself. I believed that I was not going to be there for a long time because of how they were frustrating me. Because of my experience with that nurse manager at that hospital, what they put me through there, I vowed never to work at a hospital again, and I have not since. It was such a traumatic experience for me. So these types of, experiences are not only related, it's not only nurses to nurses or amongst the staff treating each other poorly. It is also from patients and patients' families. So, and what is worse sometimes when the nurses explained it is that there's usually no policy to protect the nurses when they experience racial assault or incidents of racism from their patients and their families. Oftentimes, we expect those nurses to carry on like nothing is wrong, like nothing is happening, right? So this next statement, the nurse said, this nurse has had the patient for the 8 hours of her shift and was going to discharge the patient home. So she said, I remember going to provide discharge instruction to a patient. I came out to give him his discharge instruction. He looked at me and said, are you the one that is going to review my discharge instruction? I said, yes. He said, could you please get someone who speaks English because I'm not even sure where you got your nursing license. I don't know whether it is with Tigers in Africa. So this nurse told her manager, and the manager told me it was not about race. So the nurse also went on to say that even before this encounter, she had already had some discussions with the patient and the family, where they interrogated where she got her education, what her background was, how many years she's been a nurse. So they've already went through this interrogation of questioning her competencies because she has an accent and was trained in a different country before she started working here in this country. So the experiences of racism and racial trauma have consequences for the individuals who experience it. So whether it's a traumatic experience, hate crime, immediate or sustained racial biases and experiences or trauma over time, they have consequences for the individuals. So racism, leaves lasting impact, mental, spiritual, and physical health of the individual. It can cause some injuries that in some cases can even mimic post-traumatic stress disorder in the individuals who experience it. Some individuals can even experience physical symptoms when they encounter experiences such as the ones some of these nurses experience. So some of the comments that can bring this home to you. in this clinical role, this is a student nurse, a nurse talking about her experience as a student nurse. In this clinical rotation, this nurse kept following me around. I would go into a patient's room, she would be outside the door listening. She would go into the patient's room after me and ask them what I said to them. She complained about everything I did. I was in my final semester, and the reason she said this about final semester was she's been going through this whole process and learning, so was able to do most of the task and what she was supposed to be doing. So that is the point of saying I was in my final semester for this student. When I reported it to the clinical instructor, she said the nurse was just doing her job. I asked why she is not doing the same with other students. She shrugged and walked away. I became paranoid. I began to doubt myself. My confidence and clinical judgment slipped. Every night before my clinical, I cannot sleep. I stressed over what could happen the next day at clinical. I was a wreck. And then this other nurse talked about having to leave her job. She said, after I left that job, whenever I see someone who looked like that woman, my tormentor, or hear a voice that sounded like hers, my heart starts racing, my hands start to sweat. It was a nightmare. What she put me through, I would not wish that on my worst enemy. So other things that can happen as well is people becoming hypervigilant and anxious and experiencing physical pain. So this nurse said, as the only Black nurse on my unit, I was an outsider. They made sure I knew it in every way possible. The assignments, not offering help, pretending to be busy when I need help, not answering my patient's call light when I am busy, not looking at me when they are talking to me, sometimes talking about me like I was not there, talking shit about Black patients to see if I will respond or react. The next statement said, I would come home from work crying and given all those experiences, I did not trust anyone in that environment. I thought they were all against me and after me. I would come home, I would not sleep, I would be terrified of going back there the next day. My heart is pounding as I drive to work. I lost my confidence. I did not think that I could practice as a nurse after my experience in that job. When people make you feel like you can't do it, that you are not competent enough, you begin to believe it. I lost my confidence as a nurse. And then another one said, you cannot begin to imagine how much impact it had on my physical and emotional health. Even when I am off, I am consumed by the thought of that job and what would happen the next time I go into work. It was not healthy. So these students, students will feel attacked, nurses feel attacked. And sometimes we might think, oh, well, it's just students or people who have little experience in nursing. But I'm going to share two experiences for myself, even at my elevated position in nursing at this level. And the reason I share that experience is because the experiences of racism or racial assault does not stop because a person has, risen through the ranks of nursing. Sometimes it might be worse, right? Or it is more hidden at that level. So about the accent and a student, December 2020, I am the nursing program director for my, where I work. And sometimes I get students sent to me, for discussion to answer some questions. So I was on the phone with a student who has been admitted to our program. About a minute into the phone call, the student said, and I quote, I have to go. I am waiting for a call from the advisor. I will reach back to you if I have further questions. Then this student, I said, okay, if you have questions, let me know. You can send me an email. And then maybe 30 minutes later, I get a call from the advising office about the student. So the student called the advising office, the Global Campus Students Service Office, and said this to them: I do not want to work with her. There is a language barrier. I did not understand what she was saying. I don't know how I am going to work with someone with such language barrier. This is about me in 2020, December. So then the next one, about feeling uncomfortable that feeds right into the topic of our discussion today is, we have DEI activities within the school. Sometimes we try to get students to come by offering them extra credits, if they attended some of those events. So one faculty offered students extra credit to attend. And after that, students, a few group of students wrote a formal report against the faculty, and their report was that they felt attacked because their instructor asked them to attend a DEI book discussion as the chance to earn a credit. They felt attacked because the attendees were sharing personal stories about their experience as people of color, that it made them uncomfortable, it made them feel attacked, and that they felt discriminated against because the faculty forced them to attend this event as the only way to earn extra credit. So think about that. So why didn't they were forced to attend that as the only way they can earn extra credit? So now, what is your role then? What is our role? What is our collective and individual responsibilities for addressing racism in nursing? And again, I'm going to use the words of the people in my studies, right? So this nurse said, what can be done is being friendly to the incoming nurses of every background. When a Black nurse is the only person of color in the unit, it helps to be inclusive. The new Black nurse, the only Black student in the group, just show kindness. In any workplace, in this profession, any new nurse, any strangers need to be given a warm, welcoming attitude. When you do not get that welcoming attitude, you are done. It sends a message: we do not want you here. No matter who you are, you need that welcoming environment. And another person said, and for this person, she is kind of describing two different experiences from the job she had to leave to another job she went to and her experience there. So in this job, she met a woman, and we call the woman is a pseudonym Jillian, right? And every one of us need a Jillian. So she said the second job was a little bit better because I was lucky. I met this white woman, her name is Jillian. I always called her lifesaver. She stood up for me. She did not allow the other nurses to treat me like I was nobody, like an idiot. She was willing to stand alone in my defense. She made working in this new job tolerable. Because of her, I was able to stay in that job and learn for over 3 years. She showed me kindness. So we all need a Jillian. No matter where you are, you need a Jillian. Jillian was willing to stand alone to stop racial assault and bullying of a new nurse in a new work environment. So you need to think about it the next time when you encounter these issues. Are you going to be afraid, or are you going to remain silent? Are you going to speak and stand up for your colleagues, your peers, your classmates, other people? Are you going to be a Jillian, or are you going to remain quiet? But you have to remember though that there is a Jillian in every single one of us. So then the other person said here, give me a chance, teach me. If you feel that I'm not doing it right, teach me, show me how. Do not make fun of me. Do not report me for minor errors and learning mistakes. This is a student. Do not yell at me like I am stupid or something. Provide me with the same opportunities you provide to my white students in my class, in my clinical group. I am here to learn. I am teachable. If you are uncomfortable, This is another student, another nurse. If you are uncomfortable when I talk about my life experiences with racism and racist acts at school and at work, if this makes you uncomfortable, imagine living my life. Imagine trading places with me for a week. So excuse me if I sound angry when I feel dismissed for asking to be heard, for my experience to be validated, not to be dismissed because of the color of my skin. And this nurse said, if you would not want to be treated this way, why do you treat me this way? If you will not tolerate this behavior for yourself or your loved ones, why would you stand by and let it happen to someone else, to me, to someone who looks like me? Why do you keep quiet and say nothing? Why come to me in private to say how bad you feel about the way I was treated when I needed you to say it in the moment? Right? These similar experiences, again, it does happen in nursing education. Faculty and clinical instructors sometimes mistreat their students or allow their students to be mistreated by patients or maybe even the nurses in the clinical setting. And sometimes, we use experience or the length of time an individual have worked in a place as the excuse for why we don't want to believe that they can be perpetuating these acts of incivility or these acts of racism or biases and prejudice towards students or even new nurses on their unit, right? So this student was saying about speaking up. When I spoke up, my so-called friends abandoned me. They pretended that they did not witness the event. They left me to fend for myself. I became the class outcast. And another person said, do you know what is worse about what I went through? When I went to the unit manager, she did not believe me. She said, and this is the nurse, let's call her Jilly. Jilly has been a nurse on this unit for over 15 years. She is a very experienced and respected nurse. She would not do something like that. You must have misunderstood her. And another one said, this is a nurse talking about somebody met one of her, the nurse manager or clinic, what they call them during the shift, charge nurse, said to her something about her hair. So she confronted the person and the person said, when I confronted him, he said, I was just kidding. I did not mean it like that. You are just making a big deal out of nothing. Or sometimes they will say, can't you take a joke? There is nothing funny about racial slights and insults. Their white friends and other students just laughed, make excuses for them or turn away, not meeting my gaze. And another one said, all I need is support from my colleagues. I need you to be willing to stick your neck out on my behalf. Say something publicly instead of whispering it to me in the break room or the office when no one else will hear, or sending me a private chat. Stand up for me, speak up for me in the moment, right? So these experiences are very crucial. When you experience that happening to somebody, have courage to stand up for them. If somebody speaks up for themselves, support them. Even if you say nothing, show support and solidarity in that moment, because that is a missed opportunity to show support if you say nothing in that moment for the individual. So when they have the courage to speak up, please stand up for them. So what can we do? Again, baby steps. Inaction is unacceptable. There's a way that you can act. So racism against Black nurses, it is a historic problem that is also currently happening within our profession. It is undeniable that it is here present. If we live within the society of the United States and work in the environment in this country, it is very difficult to say that there is no racism or people don't experience it. It is there. And if you think that it doesn't happen where you work, live, or do anything, then you have a blind spot. You need to really then pay attention, right? Because denying that it exists is not even an option because it does exist. You need to get off your comfort zone and not remain silent anymore. It is also not the responsibility of people of color to teach you about racism, about biases. It's not the responsibility of our LGBTQ communities to teach you about that. We are all individuals, we're capable of learning. Do the research on your own. Learn, educate yourself. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Take control of your own learning. Watch relevant programming, read books. There are so many talks out there, learn about those things. And if you do nothing else after today, don't ever use the phrase, I do not see color. It is an insult to the people in your orbit who work with you, who are people of color, when you say you don't see color. Because when you say you don't see color, you are literally discounting a critical aspect of a person's identity. Because individual identity, their skin color is a major part of who they are. So please do not use the language, I don't see color. So some people are afraid to speak up, right? You don't want to offend somebody, you don't want to say something and they're gonna think, oh, you know, you said the wrong thing. So there are several ways that you can begin to address some of those things. You know, there is the acronym IQEE, to interrupt, question, educate, and echo. And the link is there. There's much more to this than what is on my slide. So to interrupt is if you hear discriminatory language or idea, you want to intercept that discussion and seek clarification. Ask the person, hey, what did you say? Can you explain that to me, right? Have the person tell you why. You want to interrupt it because you don't want it to keep going on. The goal is to interrupt it and stop it from, continuing. Then question. You want to question that person, who, what, when, where. Ask for better understanding of their thoughts. Seek to understand the position they're coming from. And it's important, why do they think it's important to speak that way? If somebody says, oh, the COVID-19 is, a conflu or whatever the people are calling it, ask them, why do you think it's okay to say that? If somebody says that to your colleague, your peer, that is insensitive, ask them why they think it's okay to be making a statement like that, right? Then educate. Tell them why it is important that they do not say something like that and how it can be harmful to the individuals on the receiving end of it. And then echo. Support those who speak up. Even if it is not the person who is on the receiving end, if another peer who just heard it said something and you're standing by, say something in support of the person who had the courage to speak up for that individual. Because the more people speak up, the more those actions will stop. And the more people will think twice before they can say and act in ways that, causes harm to other people within your workspace or within your learning environment. Another one is these 5 tips, again, is not mine. I read a lot of these things and I borrow very important ones from other people. This is from Francesca Ramsey. She gave these 2 tips about being an ally, right? I usually say, there are 3 steps. They say allyship, co-conspirator, and all of those things. I'd rather use the word co-conspirator, but I will take an ally. But ally is important, but ally is also action. So the first step is know and understand your privilege. A lot of us don't understand our privilege, right? Even as a Black woman, I'm an educator. So in some relationship, I have a lot of privilege, right? I have to understand my privilege, my position in order to stand up for other people. The same thing I ask for all my white colleagues, students, understand your privileged position and then use those positions and the benefit of those positions to speak up for other people in order to end racism. Listen and do your homework, right? Learn about the system where you are. Learn about how racism and racist acts operate. Learn about how bias harms the people within your orbits and speak up for them. Another thing, speaking up and not over. So even when you are in support of people, make sure, think in the chat, somebody mentioned about not taking too much space, right? So know when you need to stand by and support and when you have to speak up. Speaking up doesn't mean interrupting and speaking over. It also doesn't mean explaining for the person, right? So think about that. We talk about mansplaining. So don't try to explain how the individual feels. Talk about how you feel and how what is occurring is affecting you and how it might cause harm to other people. But speak up, but do not speak over. Another one is, like I mentioned earlier, is a learning process. Baby steps. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to act. Know that you are going to make mistakes, period. It is going to happen. Even I still make mistakes every day about it, but you have to be willing to make those mistakes. If somebody corrects you, gives you information, don't be defensive. Say thank you, learn from it, and learn even more about it. Because the problem is not that you made a mistake, is what did you do with that mistake, that learning opportunity? And apologize and move on, right? Say, I'm sorry, I made you feel that way. Don't say, but. No. Simply apologize for the action and then move on from there. Thank the individual rather than saying, oh, I apologize, I didn't mean to make you feel that way, but now you've ruined that apology, right? So try to just accept it, learn from it, and just go from there. The other thing, ally is a verb, like I said. Ally means you have to take action. Ally doesn't mean run and hide. It doesn't mean standing by and watching the people suffer. It means I'm going to say something. If your friends, your families make racist remark, homophobic remark, or anti-Asian remark, you cannot keep quiet. It requires you to take action. And think about it. Where do you have the most power to take action than your family members, right? If they say it in the family, say, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to, I don't agree with you. Make those corrections. If you can speak up with your family, then you can speak up with strangers, right? So that's important, to speak up and take action, because allyship requires action. And last but not the least, as nurses, as aspiring nurses, we all have professional and ethical obligations to confront racism, bias, homophobia, all of those isms that affect people's health equity, that cause disparities. We all have responsibilities to address them, to speak up, to do something about it. Don't condone it, don't stand by, right? And in the words of Dr. King, in the end, people will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So in this case, your co-workers, your students, your peers, people within your community, the people you hang out with every day, are your friends, and they are going to remember when you did not stand up or speak up for them. And I will end here, and I can take questions if we have time for it.
We meet until 5, so we definitely have some time for questions.
Okay, awesome. And I can